Test, test, test. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is James Hurst. I'm an assistant professor in criminal justice at Northeastern State University. I have the pleasure of speaking to you today about a project Dr. Doyle and I have been developing with a couple of our students. This is one facet of that project. This focuses on fentanyl overdose deaths in Oklahoma. It's a county level analysis and it runs from 2019 to 2021. Now, I'm sure the topic of fentanyl overdoses and fentanyl itself needs no introduction. You've probably all seen, TV segments, news stories, probably information pamphlets, things of that nature related to the dangers of the drug. Beyond that, you've probably seen demonstrations where, you get to see how to respond in an overdose incident, how to use Narcan, those types of things. It's something that point's kind of been well hammered home. But just add a little bit to it. In terms of strength, fentanyl is somewhere between 25 and 50 times stronger than heroin, and up to 100 times stronger than morphine. One of the most powerful opioids that exists, that's widely available. When you think back to its impact, just in a singular year in 2021 alone, over 100,000 people died from its use. So it's a big issue, which turns us to the purpose of this study, which is to identify the spatiotemporal nature of fentanyl overdoses in Oklahoma. The reason why we asked this question first, it's akin to asking what does it look like? What does it how does this actually manifest within the state? The reason why we did that is we want to see what it looks like before we try to figure out why it's happening. And the more important question of what do we do? How can we help? Those types of questions. We're going to get there. Right now, it's just, well, what's going on? To quickly outline previous research, talk about theory real quickly, what's driving it. If I said crime hotspots, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Some places hold more criminal activity than others. If I said, talking about crime hotspots, if you were to talk about the nature of crime itself, it's something that is very much spatially bound. If you think about what it takes for crime to exist, there are certain elements. And if you boil it down to its most essential element, you're probably talking about opportunity, and what influences opportunity. Crime pattern theory goes into that in pretty good depths. Essentially, what you start talking about there is as people move through the environment can influence it to some degree, but it's also that recursive effect of how people influence the environment that tends to affect opportunity. And it's the theory behind most crime analyses, any type of journey to crime research, and a few other areas as well. When we look at research that's been done on drug overdoses, most recently, in the last few years, a lot of it has been highlighting the fact that overdose rates are increasing. A large portion of that is being attributed to fentanyl, and largely positive due to the fact that it's fairly available, its strength, and the fact that it is strong, and the fact that makes it very easy to cut into other drugs to increase their strength, increase profit margins, things like that. Stability. When we talk about crime stability, what we start talking about is that time element. So we know that we start talking about where hotspots exist and how crime itself manifests. Typically, what we see is really no matter what level of analysis we look at, whether we're looking at street segments all the way to counties, things of that nature, we'll see that anytime you do an analysis, usually the pattern you see is approximately 80% of all crimes are attributed to 20% of locations, and 50% of crimes are attributed to 5% of locations. So it's like 5% of locations hold half of all crimes, and then the remaining 15% of locations hold the rest. So it's something very concentrated. If that's the way things manifest for crime, drug use, that's criminal in nature, would stand to reason that we'd see overdose deaths kind of follow a similar pattern. So we'd expect that they'd be relatively stable over time, that you'd see that pattern there as well. So our primary question is, what is the spatiotemporal nature of fentanyl overdose deaths within Oklahoma during the years 2019 to 2021? Our hypothesis is that spatial distribution of fentanyl deaths will have a significant level of similarity across the years 2019 through 2021. The reason why we are testing for similarity, why we even think that even if there's growth there, is it has to do with the spatial distribution. Another way of putting that is like, if we had 100 deaths this year and they're spread across all the counties that we have equally, if we have 150 deaths next year and they're spread equally, just like they were this year, they're still considered stable, even though there was an increase. So that's our hypothesis. And to get this data, what we did is we requested, well, fentanyl overdose deaths from the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. Relatively straightforward, easy process. Impressive. To get that data it was not that difficult, which is very nice. What we did is when we got that data from OBN, we aggregated it to each of the counties and then joined those numbers with the counties themselves in ArcGIS. That would be a spatial mapping software. For this, what we did specifically was called put two words together, spatial point pattern analysis. Essentially what it does is it will take two sets of spatial data, it'll overlap them to see how similar they are. And to get a little bit more complex, I'll describe it a little bit. Basically, what it does, it takes your first year of data, that's your initial set of data, your comparison set's your new set, and what it will do is it will select at random 85% of all of the points in that data set. So all of the deaths there, 85% for a given year, will be selected randomly 200 times to create a bootstrap data set that they will compare to see how similar they are. So we can create a confidence interval and say there's a 95% chance that your value is within, these values was within, we'll say 85%. That's the number we have, and the likelihood is within that level of similarity is 95%. That's how they get the significance. That's the similarity analysis itself. Here it says sensitivity analysis. The sensitivity analyses are the same type of analysis, but what they do is they remove out all zero event locations. So as I said before, when we talk about crime, 80-20, right? 80% of crimes is in 20% of your locations, right? That means 80% of locations have zero crime. So if you leave those in there, it will inflate your results to make it look like they're more stable or consistent than what they are. So you need to look at both numbers kind of simultaneously to see just how much overlap really exists. All right. For some reason, it didn't show my next table. I've got another table in there, and for some reason, it's not showing it. It's hidden. I don't want it hidden. Let's go into that. I didn't do that. Okay, so this is table 1. This outlines the top 10 counties with fentanyl overdose deaths. When you look at that, you will see that consistently the top 10 are in the, they have some of the highest levels across each of the years. There are some interesting things to watch, though. If you'll see, these numbers are fairly low. If you look at Oklahoma County, 18 deaths, 2019, 45 increased. That's a big increase. Almost 80 the following year. Tulsa at 10, 28, 84, right? This right here, out of the entire time period, this right here, these two counties, that's over half, right? You have 77 counties. Looks like you're sticking to that law of crime concentration, right? Where over half take place in less than 5% of locations. We have 77 counties, so it's not quite the same math there, but really close, similar patterns. You'll see that some of these had zeros here. I think these are sorted by, they're sorted by the overall total. It is kind of interesting if any of you are interested in seeing the full table. It's got all the counties listed. I want to say there were 19 counties in total that didn't have any fentanyl overdose deaths in the entire time period. So when we get to the sensitivity analyses, rather than 77 counties, those 19 counties will be removed, and that's what you'll have. Those are The remaining counties are the ones that are analyzed. So when we turn to the similarity analyses or stability, the threshold for reaching stability was 80%. We'll talk about that for a second because I don't think I talked about that before. The reason why 80% was chosen is that it has to do with the fact that fancy statistical term called multi-collinearity. If you've heard that word before, great. If not, basically what it means is it's any time that you're using two measures and you're essentially measuring the same thing with both, right? So if you do a correlation, let's say I measure height and weight, right? And I'm dealing with three people who have the same build. Basically what I see is height and weight, the relationship between the two. I don't need both those measures. If I want to know their height, if they have the exact same build, if I know their weight, I can calculate their height. If I know their height, I can calculate their weight. Same kind of principle here is that you hit that 80%. One of those is going to need to be removed because you're measuring the same thing twice. Here you'll see that none of the analyses reach that 80% threshold. So none of the years here would be considered stable. And in fact, when we look at the sensitivity analyses in the upper right-hand corner, they're even further reduced. So if you look at the biggest difference between years, I believe was, I can't quite see it here. What is that? It's over here. 44%, and that would be the difference between 2019 and 2021, which it makes some sense if you look at it here. Basically, what you'll see is that as time goes on, has there been growth? Yes. And has that distribution changed? Yes. So both of those things have moved. The distribution over time, and of course, the numbers you can tell in the previous table. When we look at the maps, you can see it here. It kind of makes it a little bit clearer to see. If you look at 2019, the dark green colors indicate 0 deaths, right? Actually, across the top two and 2021 in the lower left, it'll show you dark green is 0 across the board. So those are your counties that have 0 deaths. 2019, there's a lot of counties that have 0 deaths. You move 1 year later, the number of counties has increased. If you look at, it's kind of got a western, it gets kind of more off towards the west. When you look at 2021, it's spread even further. And now it's more centralized to the state and off towards the east. So it's like there's a lot to delve into there as to why that distribution would have changed that much in such a short period of time. When we turn and look at this final map here, you'll see that the 4 counties with the highest number of deaths also stood out as statistically significant. They're more than, at least 1 standard deviation, more than 2 standard deviations away from everything else in the data set. So these 4 counties are the biggest drivers for fentanyl overdose deaths in the state. But what we have here is a great deal of variation and change in its distribution over time. So that's supposed to say results did not support our initial hypotheses. I don't know how that happened. So overdose deaths did concentrate. So if you're looking at the law of crime concentration, that's upheld. However, the stability was not. Our 4 counties that had the highest highest number of deaths: Oklahoma, Tulsa, Cleveland, and Comanche counties. We did not find any stability here. It's just increasing. It's spreading to in terms of the numbers of counties involved, and the counties involved themselves are actually changing to some degree. Now, future directions with this, we're going to move into explanatory models over this year. Basically, what we're going to be looking to do is incorporate preventative measures as well as drug arrest data at a minimum. Preventive measures, that might explain why some counties popped up in year 1 and 2, so 2019, 2020, as having fentanyl deaths, and then in the following year had 0. It could be that. It could be something that some action that's been taken to help address it, that the steps, the interventions that we've had that have been taken are having an effect. It could be related to just drug networking in those areas. Not quite certain. We'd have to get into that. Incorporation of drug arrest data would kind of help us to determine that to some degree, if it's kind of following where drug arrests are taking place, or if there's any lag there, you can kind of start to set up, okay, here's, you can identify travel patterns for those types of things. Like, here's where it's being distributed, here are your hubs, and here's where we need to target it best. Another step, and we've already started doing this a little bit, comparisons with other overdose data. So one of the big questions I had when we started this is, we hear a lot about the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis. Are they the same crisis? Or are they two separate crises? It's not immediately clear. When we look here in this state, they look to be two separate, completely separate, not completely separate, but in terms of actual deaths, they're very distinct issues. One of the more interesting things is, like, is it displacing other deaths, or people who, if it weren't for fentanyl, would have gone to overdose on another drug? Or is it just, we're just straight increasing the number of people who are dying? Early kind of preview for future analyses is that's what it kind of looks like right now. With that, here's my contact information. If you all have any questions, you want anything, any data related to this, anything about it, just let me know, or let Dr. Doyle know, or if you need anything, have any questions, I'm only an email away, and I'd love to hear from you. With that, I thank you for your time. Hopefully I've not gone over time, and I should have looked at the time before I started. You all have a great day, and I'll hope to meet you at some point in the future. Have a great one. Bye.